Daniel Marks had never felt more out of place. The grand palace of the Altharians, perched high above the city, seemed to stretch endlessly before him. The walls were lined with shining silver and crystal, and the air felt thick with power. As part of a diplomatic envoy from Earth, Daniel had seen his fair share of grand cities, but this was unlike anything he had ever experienced. The Altharians, with their ancient culture and advanced technology, held secrets that Daniel had yet to even begin to understand. Tonight, however, it wasn't diplomacy or political negotiations that had brought him here. The summons had come unexpectedly, an invitation, not to the grand halls of the court, but to Queen Lyrix's private chambers, a request that was unheard of for a human like him. He had been chosen by the queen herself, and though Daniel had seen his fair share of odd customs in his career, this one made him uneasy. His steps echoed in the silent, marble corridors as he made his way through the palace, the walls towering above him. He had been briefed on the queen's reputation: powerful, intelligent, and shrouded in mystery. Her reign was unquestioned, but even she had her enemies. And recently, rumors of unrest had spread throughout the kingdom. The queen was not just a monarch. She was the heart of an empire that had stood for centuries. But tonight, Daniel was not here to discuss treaties or trade. He was here for something far more personal. When he reached the grand doors of the queen's chambers, they swung open with a quiet hum, revealing the dimly lit interior. A few candles flickered along the edges of the room, casting long shadows on the walls. The room itself was filled with rich, luxurious fabrics, thick rugs, tapestries, and elegant furniture, each piece a testament to the queen's immense power. And standing by the large window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape, was Queen Lyrixa herself. Daniel paused for a moment, caught off guard by her presence. Queen Lyrixa was everything he had heard about and more. Tall and graceful, with piercing silver eyes that seemed to see through him, she exuded an aura of authority. Her hair, dark as the night sky, flowed down her back like a river of silk. She wore a simple, yet regal gown, its deep blue color matching the night outside. As she turned to face him, Daniel felt his breath catch in his throat. There was something mesmerizing about her, something that made him feel both awe and unease. "You're here," she said, her voice smooth and commanding, yet soft. She motioned for him to approach. "Come closer, Daniel Marks." He stepped forward, his footsteps slow and cautious. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing respectfully. "I'm honored by your summons. I wasn't expecting this kind of invitation." Queen Lyrix's lips curved into a faint smile. "Few have, diplomat. But tonight, we're not talking of alliances or treaties. I need you for something else." Daniel's curiosity grew. "What can I help you with, Your Majesty?" The queen's smile faded, her expression becoming serious. "There are things happening in my empire, things that threaten my rule. I need someone who is not tied to the politics of my court. Someone like you." Daniel frowned, confused. "I don't understand, Your Majesty. What do you mean by someone like me?" "You'll see soon enough," she replied, her voice steady and firm. "But know this, Daniel. The future of my empire may depend on what happens tonight. I have chosen you for a reason." Daniel stood in the center of Queen Lyrix's chambers, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of her words. He had been prepared to discuss diplomatic affairs, to make deals that would ensure peace between Earth and the Altharian Empire. But this was something entirely different. He had been summoned by the queen herself, and now she was speaking of something far beyond his understanding. Her eyes were fixed on him, unblinking, as if she could read every thought in his head. There was a calmness to her presence, but underneath it, Daniel could feel the pressure building, the weight of her expectations. "I'm not sure what you mean, Your Majesty," Daniel said carefully, trying to keep his voice steady. "You speak of threats to your rule. What do you want from me?" Queen Lyrix's gaze softened, and she took a step closer. Her every movement was graceful, purposeful. "I have been queen for many cycles, Daniel, but my power has been challenged. There are factions within my empire that want to take my throne. My rule is at risk, and I need someone outside of my court, to help me." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Someone outside of your court?" He couldn't hide the confusion in his voice. "But I'm a human. I'm here on behalf of Earth, not as a political player in your empire." The queen nodded slowly, her eyes unwavering. "Exactly. You are not bound by the politics of my world. You are an outsider, and that is why I chose you." She moved towards a nearby table, where a series of intricate maps and scrolls lay open. Her fingers brushed over the ancient documents, tracing patterns with a touch so delicate that it seemed almost ritualistic. Daniel followed her movements, his curiosity growing. "You see," she continued, "in my empire, there are ancient traditions that hold power over the people, rites of passage, ceremonies that determine leadership. And there is one tradition in particular that has been forgotten by most." Daniel frowned, not quite following. "A tradition? What does this have to do with me?" Queen Lyrix's silver eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, it felt as if she were peering straight into his soul. "Tonight, Daniel, I need you to help me complete that tradition." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken meaning. Finally, she continued. "The tradition is called the bonding of the thrones," Lyrixa explained. "In times of crisis, the ruler must form a bond, an alliance, a connection, with someone who is not part of the ruling class. This bond strengthens the ruler's position and solidifies their claim to the throne. It is an ancient rite that has been practiced by my people for centuries, though few remember its significance." Daniel's heart raced as the realization began to sink in. "Are you asking me to bond with you?" He had heard rumors about alien rituals, but he never expected to be caught in the middle of one. Queen Lyrixa nodded. "Yes, the ritual involves more than just a formal alliance. It is a bond of trust, of power, of shared strength. You must be the one to help me complete it. If I do not have this bond, I will lose my place on the throne. The factions will rise up against me." Her words were blunt, yet there was a vulnerability behind them that Daniel hadn't expected. The queen, this ruler who seemed untouchable, flawless, was asking for his help in a way that felt deeply personal. "I know this is a lot to ask, Daniel," she said softly, her voice laced with urgency. "But I cannot do this alone. I need you to trust me, as I am trusting you." Daniel's mind was spinning. Everything he knew about diplomacy, about how he had been trained to approach these kinds of situations, was being thrown out the window. He had come to Theris to negotiate peace, not to participate in a royal ritual that would bind him to the throne of an alien queen. Yet there was something in the queen's gaze, something raw and genuine, that made it hard for him to refuse. I don't know if I can," Daniel said, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to remain calm. "What exactly does this ritual entail?" Queen Lyrix's eyes flickered with understanding. She could see his hesitation, the weight of his decision. "It is not just a symbolic act, Daniel. It is a deep connection, an understanding of each other's strength. Once the bond is made, there is no going back. You will be tied to my rule, and together, we will face whatever comes next." The tension in the room was thick. Daniel's mind raced as he considered the queen's words. The future of the Altharian Empire rested on his decision, and for the first time in his life, he felt the full weight of that responsibility. But there was one thing he knew for sure. No matter what happened, his life would never be the same. Daniel stood motionless, the queen's words hanging in the air like an impossible challenge. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, his mind racing. He had come to Theris with a single goal, to negotiate peace between Earth and the Altharians. Now, the queen was asking him for something much more personal, something far beyond diplomacy. This wasn't just about saving a kingdom. It was about his very place in an alien world. Queen Lyrix's calm gaze never left him, as though she was waiting for him to make his choice. There was a silent understanding between them, a recognition that this was no ordinary request. "I know this is difficult," she said, her voice softer now. "But you are the one I trust. I would not ask this of you if I had another option." Daniel swallowed hard, his mind grappling with the enormity of what was being asked. He could walk away, return to his people and his planet, and leave the Altharian Empire to its struggles. Or he could stay and become a part of something far greater than he could ever imagine. The Queen's offer wasn't just political. It was a test of everything he thought he knew about power, loyalty, and trust. "I've never done anything like this," Daniel said, his voice shaky. I'm not sure I can be what you need." Lyrixa took a step toward him, closing the distance between them. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she allowed herself to show a hint of vulnerability. "You do not need to be perfect, Daniel. No one is. But together, we can become something stronger. A ruler must have trust in their people, and their people must trust in them. This bond, this ritual, will unite us in a way that is deeper than any words can explain." Daniel looked into her eyes, and for a moment, he could see the uncertainty hidden beneath her regal composure. She wasn't just a queen looking to secure her throne. She was a woman who had spent years carrying the weight of an empire on her shoulders, and now she was asking him for help. "You don't have to do this alone," he said quietly. "I'm not sure what this ritual means, but I'll help you." Queen Lyrixa nodded, her expression relieved. "Thank you, Daniel. You do not know what this means to me." She turned and motioned for him to follow her. The queen led him to a large circular room at the heart of her chambers. The walls were adorned with ancient symbols, each one glowing faintly in the dim light. At the center of the room was a raised platform, covered in intricate designs and markings. A small altar rested at its center, flanked by two tall, glowing obelisks. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with energy. Daniel could sense the power in this place, the weight of generations of tradition that had taken place here. "This is the heart of the ritual," Lyrixa explained as she guided him toward the platform. "It has been done this way for centuries, since the first of my ancestors ruled. The bond is formed here, in this room, where power is exchanged." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had read about the ancient rites of the Altharians, but standing in the center of it all, he realized just how little he truly understood. His role in this ritual wasn't clear, but he knew it was crucial. "You don't need to say anything," the queen said, her voice calm but filled with authority. "Just stand with me. Let the energy flow between us." Daniel nodded, feeling both nervous and oddly reassured by her steady presence. They stood side by side on the platform, facing each other. Lyrixa closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and Daniel followed suit. The room seemed to hum with energy, the air thick with anticipation. Slowly, Lyrixa reached out and placed her hand on his arm, her touch cool yet comforting. The moment her skin made contact with his, Daniel felt a jolt run through him, a pulse of energy that was almost too much to comprehend. It was as if the room itself had come alive, and in that moment, he could feel her power, her resolve, and her fear, everything she had kept hidden. "You are ready," Lyrixa said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Let the ritual begin." As her words echoed in the air, the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, and the obelisks beside them pulsed with light. A strange warmth filled the room, wrapping around them both. Daniel could feel the energy between them, alive, electric, undeniable. The bond was forming. He could feel it. His heart raced as he realized that this ritual wasn't just about power. It was about trust, about two beings from different worlds coming together to shape the future of a kingdom. The moment was now. As the ritual began, Daniel's heart raced, the pulse of energy between him and Queen Lyrixa growing stronger. It was as if the air around them had thickened, charged with an unseen force. Every breath Daniel took felt heavy, filled with a strange warmth that spread from the queen's touch to every corner of his body. The symbols on the walls of the chamber glowed brighter, casting a soft light over the platform where they stood. Lyrix's hand remained steady on his arm, her touch both reassuring and commanding. Daniel closed his eyes, trying to steady his mind, but the sensations were overwhelming. It felt like the room itself was alive, resonating with an ancient power that he could barely begin to comprehend. He had expected to feel fear, to pull away, but instead he felt drawn to her, his thoughts no longer entirely his own. As though the bond they were creating was more than just physical. There was something deeper at work here. "You must focus." Lyrix's voice broke through the growing intensity, calm and authoritative. "Feel the power. Let it flow through you." Daniel opened his eyes and looked at her, seeing her in a new light. The queen, always so composed, now looked as if she was surrendering herself to the ritual as much as he was. There was no arrogance in her gaze, only determination and a vulnerability he had never seen before. The room began to vibrate, the hum of energy filling the air, and Daniel felt it. His heartbeat seemed to sync with the pulse of the chamber, the warmth from Lyrix's hand spreading like wildfire through his chest. For a fleeting moment, he felt as though their two worlds, his human, earthbound life and her ancient Altharian reign, were melding together. "This is the bond," Lyrixa whispered, her voice barely audible against the rising hum. "We are becoming one, Daniel. Our strength, our will be shared." Daniel felt a wave of emotions, his own confusion, the queen's fear, but also something more. Trust. Trust that was being forged in the heat of the ritual. There was no going back now. Whatever happened next would shape not just his life, but the future of an entire empire. As the light from the obelisks grew brighter, Daniel's vision blurred. It was as if he could see the queen's thoughts, feel her doubts, and understand the weight of her responsibility as ruler. In that moment, he knew why she had asked for his help. She was alone, burdened by a throne that no one else could understand. "Let me in, Daniel," she said, her voice both gentle and urgent. "Let me into your heart, your mind. Only then can we be truly united." Her words seemed to reverberate through his body, her emotions intertwining with his. The connection between them deepened, and Daniel could feel his own fears, doubts, and weaknesses slipping away, replaced by a shared strength. It was as if they were no longer two separate beings but part of the same force, bound by something more powerful than mere politics. He reached up, his hand trembling slightly as he placed it over hers. His skin met hers, and the connection between them surged. The warmth, the energy, and the power were now undeniable. The ritual had worked, but in a way, it was more than just a rite of passage. It was a union, something spiritual, emotional, and physical. The symbols on the walls reached their brightest point, and then, as quickly as it had begun, the energy in the room started to calm. The light from the obelisks dimmed, and the pulse of energy between them slowed, leaving only the soft, steady beat of their hearts in sync. Daniel blinked, trying to clear his head. His entire body felt alive, as though the ritual had awakened something deep inside him. It wasn't just the power he had felt. It was a bond that tied him to Lyrixa, and through her, to the empire she ruled. The room fell silent, and Lyrixa slowly removed her hand from his arm. Her gaze met his, and there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "It is done," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had just happened. The bond between them was real, and there was no going back. He was no longer just a human diplomat. He had become part of the Queen's world, her strength, and her future. "You're not alone anymore," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the overwhelming emotions still coursing through him. Lyrixa smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her. "No, we are stronger together." The moments after the ritual felt surreal. Daniel's mind was still racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. The bond between him and Queen Lyrixa had been forged, but it wasn't just a simple connection. It was something far deeper, something that tied him to her and to her empire in ways he could barely understand. Lyrixa stood beside him, her regal composure slowly returning. The glow from the obelisks faded, and the room, once filled with an electric charge, now felt quieter, almost peaceful. But the calm didn't last long. There was still work to be done, and Daniel could feel the tension that remained in the air. The power of the ritual had sealed their bond, but it was the future that now loomed ahead, uncertain and dangerous. The queen turned to face him, her eyes searching his with a mixture of curiosity and expectancy. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice gentle but laced with a hint of concern. Daniel took a deep breath, his chest still heavy with the weight of what they had just shared. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "It's overwhelming. But it feels real, like something I can't ignore. I'm tied to you now, Queen Lyrixa. Tied to this empire." Lyrixa nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. "That is the essence of the bond. It connects us, not just as ruler and ally, but as something deeper. But now that it's done, you must understand the consequences. There is no turning back." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine at her words. He had known that the ritual would change things, but now, standing at the crossroads of this new reality, he could feel the weight of his decision. He wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was part of the Altharian Empire, part of the Queen's reign. "You will have enemies now," Lyrixa continued, her tone more serious than it had been before. "There are those who will question your place here, and some who will try to use this bond against us. The factions that oppose me will stop at nothing to tear us apart." Daniel looked at her, meeting her gaze. "I didn't come here for this. I came to help negotiate peace, not to become embroiled in a power struggle." "I understand," Lyrixa said softly. "But you are now part of my world, Daniel. And your strength, your loyalty, will be tested. You must prove your commitment to my throne and to the future of this empire." The queen stepped closer, her presence commanding yet gentle. "I trust you, but this trust must be earned. The first test of our bond will come soon enough." Daniel's heart raced. What kind of test? Lyrixa's gaze darkened, her expression hardening with resolve. "The factions are already moving. They won't give us time to breathe. There is a political alliance within the court, a group who believes the throne should be claimed by someone else. I will need you by my side in the coming days, Daniel. We must show them that we are united." Her words were like a challenge, an unspoken invitation to step up and prove his worth. It was no longer just about his role as a diplomat. It was about standing by her side, standing up to the forces that threatened the empire. Daniel took a deep breath, his mind clearing. He had crossed a line tonight, one that could never be uncrossed. But there was something about Lyrixa, her strength, her vulnerability, that made him want to stand by her, no matter what. The bond they shared wasn't just political, it was real, and he couldn't ignore it. "I'm with you," Daniel said, his voice steady. "Whatever comes next, I'll stand by your side. We'll face it together." Lyrixa's eyes softened, a hint of gratitude flashing in them. "I knew I could trust you, Daniel. Together, we will secure the future of this empire." She stepped back, her gaze scanning the room, as though already preparing for the next battle. "The first test will be soon. We must be ready." Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. The bond they had formed was more than just a promise. It was a pact that would define the future of the Altharian Empire. And with Lyrixa at his side, he knew that the road ahead, though dangerous, was one they would face together. The days following the ritual were filled with tension. Daniel had become more than just a diplomat. He was now a key player in the Altharian Empire, bound by the powerful bond forged between him and Queen Lyrixa. But as the queen had warned him, their enemies were not far behind. The political factions within the court had begun to stir. Whispers echoed through the palace halls, and the once celebratory atmosphere of victory had shifted into one of uncertainty. There were those who had never accepted Lyrixa's rule, and now, with Daniel's unexpected role by her side, they saw an opportunity to strike. Lyrixa seemed calm on the outside, but Daniel could see the weight of it all in her eyes. Her usual air of unshakable confidence was now mixed with an undercurrent of anxiety. They were both walking a fine line. The bond they shared was powerful, but it wasn't enough to silence the factions who wanted to see her dethroned. "You must be prepared for what comes next," Lyrixa said, her voice low and serious as she stood beside him in the palace's war room. The room was filled with maps, intelligence reports, and the quiet hum of people strategizing. The weight of the moment pressed down on them, and Daniel could feel the responsibility settling on his shoulders. "What exactly are we facing?" Daniel asked, trying to mask his growing anxiety. It wasn't just about keeping peace anymore. His life, the future of Earth's relationship with the Altharians, and Lyrix's reign all depended on this moment. "The court has already begun to divide," Lyrixa replied. "My most loyal supporters remain, but there are factions who seek to control my throne. They will challenge our bond, challenge me, and they will test your loyalty. They believe you are a weakness, a human who cannot understand the intricacies of Altharian politics. We will have to prove them wrong." Daniel nodded, his mind sharp, but his heart still unsure. He had no experience with court politics, let alone the delicate balance of ruling an empire. Yet, as he looked at Lyrixa, he knew there was no turning back. He had made his choice, and he had to trust that his instincts would guide him. "We'll face this together," Daniel said, his voice more confident than he felt. "I won't let anyone tear this empire apart." Lyrixa's eyes softened, a small smile gracing her lips. "I know you won't," she said quietly, "but it won't be easy. Your loyalty will be tested in ways you cannot predict." The moment was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door, and one of the palace aides entered with a report. She approached Lyrixa with urgency, her face tense. "Your Majesty, a messenger from the court requests an audience," the aide said, bowing respectfully. "They bring word of a new alliance forming among the dissenting factions. They seek to challenge your authority." Daniel's stomach tightened. The test had begun. Lyrixa turned to him, her expression unreadable. "This is it. The first test. I must face them now, or they will see our bond as a sign of weakness. Come with me." Without another word, they followed the aide down the grand hall toward the royal chamber, where the rebellious factions had gathered. The heavy atmosphere in the palace felt suffocating, and Daniel's mind raced as they moved deeper into the heart of the court. When they reached the chamber, Daniel was struck by the sight of the gathering. The room was filled with some of the most powerful figures in the Altharian Empire, military leaders, noblemen, and politicians who had long held sway over the kingdom. They were all watching with keen interest, and their gazes were sharp as they turned toward Lyrixa and Daniel. The leader of the faction, a tall and imposing figure named Lord Ferric, stood at the front of the group. His cold eyes locked onto Lyrix's, and a sneer spread across his face. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice dripping with disdain, "I see you have brought your human ally with you. How quaint. Tell me, how does he expect to rule beside you when he cannot even understand the challenges of your people?" Daniel stepped forward, meeting Lord Ferric's gaze with as much confidence as he could muster. "I understand loyalty," he said firmly, "and I understand strength. I'm here to stand by the Queen, and I won't let anyone undermine what we've built." The room fell silent for a moment, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Lyrixa stood beside Daniel, her eyes unwavering. She had placed her trust in him, and now it was his turn to prove that trust was well placed. "Lord Ferric," Lyrixa said, her voice cutting through the silence, "you will find that your schemes will not break my rule. Daniel and I are united, and together we will see this empire thrive." The challenge was set. The first test of their bond had begun, and Daniel knew that whatever happened next would determine the future of both their lives and the Altharian Empire. The tension in the chamber was unbearable. Daniel could feel the eyes of the powerful Altharian nobles on him, and he knew the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about survival. Lyrix's rule was on the line, and now it was up to both of them to prove that their bond wasn't just a symbol, it was a foundation strong enough to hold the empire together. Lord Ferric stood tall, his cold gaze never leaving Daniel. He had been one of the leaders of the rebellious factions, and his eyes spoke of decades of power struggles, his patience wearing thin. The rest of the room was quiet, waiting for the next move. Daniel couldn't help but feel the weight of every pair of eyes on him. "You speak of loyalty, human," Lord Ferric sneered, his voice filled with scorn. "But loyalty means nothing if you don't understand the true power that holds this kingdom together. You, a mere diplomat, have no place beside our queen. The people will never accept a foreigner on the throne." The words stung, but Daniel refused to show weakness. He had been in tough situations before, but this was different. It wasn't just about Earth's survival anymore. It was about standing by the woman who had trusted him with everything. He would not let her down. "I've seen enough of your games, Ferric," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the fire building inside him. "Power isn't just about bloodlines or titles. It's about who can be trusted. And Queen Lyrixa and I are the ones who can bring this empire forward. Together." The room was still. Some of the nobles shifted uncomfortably, unsure of where to place their loyalty. But Daniel could feel the change. His words were having an effect. For the first time, the voices of rebellion in the room seemed quieter. Lyrixa stood beside him, her posture regal and unyielding. Her eyes met his, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. She trusted him. And in that moment, Daniel realized that their bond wasn't just a political maneuver. It was a genuine connection. It was more than just survival. They had become partners, bound by more than just their roles as rulers. Lord Ferric's face darkened, but he didn't back down. "You are still nothing but a pawn in this game, a temporary solution, nothing more. The throne was never meant for you." For a moment, Daniel thought the tension would snap, but he held his ground. The throne isn't about who was meant for it. It's about who can protect it and the people. And I'm here to stand with her. I won't let you tear this empire apart just because it doesn't fit your idea of power. The silence stretched on, but Daniel could see the cracks beginning to form in Ferric's confidence. There were murmurs in the crowd now, some in support of Lyrixa, some in support of Ferric, but the balance was shifting. Ferric had underestimated the strength of their unity. "I see now that you will not bow to us," Ferric said, his voice lowering in frustration. "But this isn't over. The people will not accept your reign. The rebellion will rise again." Lyrixa stepped forward, her voice clear and commanding. "If the rebellion rises, it will fall just as quickly. I will not let my people suffer because of selfish ambition. This kingdom will be ruled by strength and loyalty, and I will not let anyone take what is mine." Her words were powerful, and the tension in the room started to dissolve. Ferric's allies were backing off, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. They had seen the strength in Lyrix's resolve, and now they were seeing it in Daniel too. This was more than just a queen's fight. It was their fight, together. Ferric's defiance wavered, and with a final bitter glance at Daniel and Lyrixa, he turned and left the room. The rest of the rebellious factions, though still uncertain, were left in silence, the power of the bond between the queen and her human ally undeniable. As the door closed behind Ferric, Daniel exhaled a long breath, his body finally relaxing. He had faced the test of loyalty and survived, but more importantly, he had stood by Lyrix's side. They had proven their strength, and the empire had witnessed it. Lyrixa turned to him, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Daniel. We are stronger together. This empire is ours to shape." Daniel met her gaze, his heart steady. "We've only just begun. Together, we can change the future." As they stood together, a united force against those who would tear them apart, Daniel knew that whatever came next, they would face it as one, unbreakable, unshakable, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.